Hey guys, tonight's story starts with a snore so deep it stirs the candlesticks. A royal slipper is floating in a bowl of soup, and a bed takes 5 servants and 2 goats to fluff properly. You've just woken up in a medieval palace. The ceiling is leaking. Someone's praying very loudly in Latin 2 doors down, and the king is arguing with his astrologer about what hour is safest to nap. No one agrees. Someone brings you a mug of something hot that smells like old parchment and boiled thyme. You're not sure if this is morning or night or just Tuesday. Welcome to a world where sleep is political, suspicious, and occasionally conducted inside a closet. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable. Let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake up in a bed that rustles, not in the gentle, cozy way that suggests warm straw and rustic charm, but in the slow, meandering way that implies coins are shifting beneath your spine, and something may be whispering prayers directly into your kidneys. You shift once and are immediately met with the unmistakable crinkle of parchment and the faint scent of lavender that has given up. The mattress wheezes like an old priest on a cold stairwell. Somewhere beneath you, you're fairly certain a small copper relic just made eye contact with your spleen. A servant stands nearby, fanning you with what appears to be a full goose knot, a feathered fan, not a tasteful plume, a goose, living, mildly indifferent. Its eyes track your every movement, like it's deciding whether you're food, royalty, or just someone who once stepped on its cousin. You sit up slowly, cautiously, as the bed groans beneath you like it's been through things it will never talk about. The air in the room is thick, a tapestry woven from the scents of beeswax, damp stone, and the lingering ghost of last night's roasted boar. Sunlight struggles through a narrow, arched window, a single, dusty beam that illuminates a swarm of dancing dust motes, each one carrying a tiny, silent history of the room. You try to clear your throat, but the sound that emerges is more of a dusty croak, like a frog that's been reading ancient scrolls for a week straight. The servant with the goose doesn't flinch. He simply adjusts his grip on the bird, which honks softly in protest. His Majesty requests your presence, the servant says, his voice as flat and gray as the stone walls. He has had a dream. It involved a 3-legged badger and the future of the turnip harvest. This is delivered with the same emotional weight as announcing the weather. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, your feet landing on a rug that feels suspiciously like woven hair. You decide not to think about it. The floor is cold, a shock that travels up your spine and reminds you that you are, in fact, awake. You are handed a tunic made of coarse wool that seems to have a personality of its own, mostly scratchy and judgmental. Getting dressed is a negotiation, not an action. As you step out of the bedchamber, the hallway is a chaotic symphony of medieval life. A dog with a stolen loaf of bread sprints past, pursued by a yelling baker. 2 guards are locked in a silent, intense game of knucklebones in a shadowed alcove. The air hums with a dozen different conversations, none of which you can quite make out, creating a low, constant murmur that feels like the castle itself is breathing. You're led down a spiral staircase, each stone step worn smooth in the center by centuries of hurried feet. The walls are lined with tapestries, but they aren't grand scenes of battle or coronations. No, these depict mundane events in startling detail. A tapestry of a man stubbing his toe, another of a woman trying to get a cat out of a tree, and a particularly large one detailing the royal accountant's struggle with a difficult tax calculation. It's strangely humanizing. You finally arrive at the king's private chambers. He's not in a grand throne room, but a small, cluttered study filled with scrolls, astrolabes, and a half-eaten apple that's starting to look a bit sad. The king himself is a man whose face is a roadmap of worry. He's pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly with a piece of toast. "The badger," he exclaims as you enter, not as a greeting, but as a continuation of a conversation he's been having with himself. He was wearing a tiny crown, a crown of turnips. What does it mean? Is the harvest blessed, or are we about to be overthrown by a monarchy of root vegetables? His astrologer, a frail man who looks like he's made of parchment himself, is wringing his hands. "Your Majesty, the stars are unclear. Mercury is in retrograde, which could mean anything from a bountiful harvest to a mild case of indigestion for the royal cook. This is your life now. You are the official royal dream interpreter, a position you acquired yesterday after correctly guessing what the Queen's dream about a floating shoe meant. It meant she wanted new shoes. Your job is to navigate the delicate egos of royalty, the vague pronouncements of astrologers, and the ever-present possibility of being blamed for a bad turnip season. You take a deep breath, the air tasting of anxiety and toast crumbs. You look at the king, his eyes wide with genuine fear of a badger coup. You look at the astrologer, who is now consulting a chart that seems to be a detailed map of a sandwich, and you begin to craft a story that is soothing, plausible, and involves absolutely no overthrow by tuber-based royalty. "Your Majesty," you begin, your voice calm and measured. The three-legged badger signifies strength in the face of adversity. The crown of turnips is a clear sign from the heavens. It means the harvest will be so abundant, so legendary, that it will be a crown upon your reign. The king stops pacing. A slow smile spreads across his face. He loves it. He claps you on the shoulder, a little too hard, and declares that you shall be rewarded with another goose for fanning. Apparently, it's a status symbol. As you're led away, goose number 2 tucked uncomfortably under your arm, you pass by the soup kitchen. You glance into the large pot and see it a single, elegant slipper, bobbing gently in the broth. You just shake your head and keep walking. In this palace, some mysteries are best left unsolved. The first goose honks, as if in agreement. The new one just stares at you, its beady eyes full of judgment. You have a feeling it knows you just made all that up about the badger. You make your way back to your room, the palace's gentle chaos, a familiar lullaby now. You pass the man praying in Latin, his voice a steady, rhythmic chant. You hear the distant sound of a lute being played, slightly out of tune but with great enthusiasm. This strange, leaky, noisy, wonderful place is, for now, your home. As you re-enter your chamber, your servant is there, waiting. He takes the new goose from you with a practiced, solemn air, as if he's been handling royal fowl his entire life. He places it in a corner where it immediately starts a silent staring contest with the first goose. You have a feeling a turf war is brewing. You crawl back into the bed, the mattress greeting you with its familiar, wealthy rustle. The servant doesn't fan you this time. Instead, he pulls the heavy velvet curtains shut, plunging the room into a deep, comforting gloom. The sounds of the castle fade into a distant hum. The arguing king, the praying priest, the stolen bread, all melts into a single, cohesive background noise. You lie there, nestled among the hidden coins and forgotten relics in your mattress. The scent of lavender that has given up no longer seems sad, just resigned, peaceful, even to close your eyes. In this world where sleep is a commodity and dreams are state affairs, you have somehow found a moment of peace. You managed to avert a crisis over a root vegetable rebellion. You've doubled your personal goose collection, and you are about to drift off to sleep. And in a medieval palace, that's a pretty good day. As you drift away, your last thought is a blurry one. Maybe tomorrow, you'll ask what's in the soup, or maybe you won't. No, we're staying overnight in what might just be the most peculiar guest room in existence. So, grab a cup of tea or, perhaps honeyed wine and, let's check in. The first thing you notice is the bed. Forget your standard IKEA frame. This thing is carved from some dark, mysterious wood that feels like it was a sacred tree in a past life. The headboard is covered in these intricate symbols. I've been squinting at them for a solid 10 minutes. I think this one here is a bishop juggling fish, which feels ... specific. And next to it, what is that? A bear wearing a crown. Or maybe just a very very fluffy monk. The longer I stare, the more I'm convinced these aren't just decorations. It feels like I am trying to decipher a secret code that will either grant me eternal wisdom or just tell me where the extra pillows are. Now, let's talk about the room itself. It's vast, I mean, truly enormous. The ceilings are so high, they make me feel uncomfortably small, like I've accidentally stumbled into a giant's dollhouse. And the curtains, they're not just fabric. They're architectural marvels. I'm pretty sure they're holding up this side of the castle. They're so thick, they could probably survive a siege. Over by the hearth, there's a tapestry hanging slightly crooked, which is driving me absolutely insane. It depicts, well, it's either a dramatic battle scene or a very tense family picnic. It's hard to tell. Is that a sword or a very pointy baguette? Are they fighting or just aggressively passing the potato salad? The ambiguity is stressful. And speaking of the hearth, there's a fire crackling away, which would be cozy, except it's the middle of summer. The room is already warmer than I'm emotionally prepared for. It's like stepping into a sauna that also happens to be judging you. The air is thick with the scent of sweet, honeyed wine, mixed with incense and something else. Something sharp. It's like boiled onions and deep-seated indecision had a baby. It's a very specific aroma, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. Just as I was contemplating the olfactory mystery, a footman appeared. His hat was a masterpiece of engineering, taller than his entire sense of self. He announced, with great gravitas, that breakfast will be served in 2 yawns. I just nodded solemnly, as if I completely understood this unit of time. Is a yawn a long, sleepy one, or a short, polite one? These are the important questions. He then bowed so low his hat nearly extinguished a nearby candle, and proceeded to back out of the room. He only tripped once, gracefully, over a solid gold chamber pot that everyone in the room pretended not to see. It was a masterclass in awkward exits. I decided to get up and investigate further. I swung my legs off the bed, and my foot landed on a small pile of something. I'm really hoping it's ceremonial confetti. Please let it be confetti and not some bizarre, old-timey attempt at floor insulation. The floor itself is cold, polished stone. It's so shiny, it reflects my own bewildered face with every step, mocking my confusion. It's like walking on a mirror that knows all your secrets. On a nearby stool, a set of robes was neatly folded. They looked comfortable enough, but they were scented with something vaguely herbal and definitively disapproving. It's a scent that says, I'm fresh and clean. But I'm not happy about it. I feel like I've already disappointed my own clothes before even putting them on. Just then, a maid entered without a sound. She carried a fresh towel and a bucket of water that was steaming. The steam had a certain intensity, the kind that suggests this is meant to be refreshing in the same way a slap to the face is invigorating. She set it down, curtsied so low she almost disappeared, and whispered, "Mind the mattress. It complains if you bounce too quickly." Then, poof, she was gone before I could ask the most obvious follow-up question in human history. Is that literal or metaphorical? Does the mattress actually speak, or does it just sort of grumble? I needed to know. My curiosity now fully piqued, I returned to the bed. This was no longer just a place to sleep. It was an enigma wrapped in a duvet. I carefully lifted the corner of the top blanket, half expecting to find simple straw, or maybe some lumpy wool. But oh no, that would be far too normal. Instead, I found layers. Actual, distinct layers. Like a geological cross-section of weirdness. The first layer was incredibly soft and smelled faintly of lavender and judgment. Yes, definitely judgment. The next layer down was stiff and, alarmingly, moist. I have no explanation for the dampness, and frankly, I don't want one. I'm just going to pretend it's morning dew from a magical indoor meadow. The third layer was the real surprise. It had actual coins sewn directly into the quilting. Hundreds of them. Why? Was this a security measure? Or was it some kind of primitive acupressure? The theory being that back pain could be soothed by the firm, unrelenting reminder of national currency. Don't worry about your aching spine. Just think of the economy. Digging deeper. tucked just beneath the fourth layer, which felt suspiciously like it was filled with dried leaves. I found a small pamphlet. The title, printed in elegant Latin script, read Moral Conduct in Dreaming, and it was very clearly stained with, let's call it wine, a deep red wine. It seemed to be a guide on how to behave ethically while unconscious. I suddenly felt very nervous about my recurring dream where I steal all the muffins from a bakery. Finally, the last piece of this puzzle, the pillow. It was shaped like a standard rectangle, but it had the distinct texture of old, hard cheese. I'm not exaggerating. It was firm, a little crumbly around the edges, and the smell, oh, the smell. It was a delicate bouquet of sage and long-held disappointment. It was the scent of 1,000 broken promises and forgotten birthdays. With a deep breath, I gathered my courage and poked it. Just once. And I swear to you, it sighed. A soft, weary exhalation of air. I froze. The pillow sighed at me. At that point, I decided to stop asking questions. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. So here I am, in a room that defies logic, on a bed that defies comfort, with a pillow that audibly expresses its existential despair. It's going to be a long night. I'm not sure if I'll get any sleep, but I'm certain I'll have a story to tell. I'll be sure to update you all on the contents of the dream manual and whether or not breakfast was, in fact, served after 2 yawns. Outside the window, the sound of horses stomping and someone screaming about jam echoes through the courtyard. A bell rings somewhere above me. The goose hums. The door creaks open again, and a steward in full formal regalia enters, holding a scroll. And by formal, I mean he's wearing twice as many buttons as any man should. He unrolls it dramatically, revealing my schedule for the day. 1 ceremonial yawn, 2 contemplative sighs, breakfast with the royal cousins, and a nap evaluation to be completed before sunset. Your sleep quality will be rated by His Majesty's Committee of Somnolent Advisors, he says, his voice as stiff as his collar. Please record any dreams you may have had involving foxes, feathers, or sin. I nod, wondering if the dream about the jellyfish counts. He doesn't wait for clarification. Once he's gone, I sit back on the bed. The mattress emits a suspicious sigh. The goose eyes me. I think about my own bed at home. Simple, flat, unscented, and blissfully unlikely to contain political commentary. But here, in this room, where even the fire seems to judge me, my rest is an act of diplomacy. I shift slightly to the left, and a tiny rustle under the blanket mutters something about penance. I freeze. The mattress crunches again, coins shifting, paper rustling, dreams praying beneath me like saints who overslept. I lie down. I close my eyes. I try not to bounce. Later, I'm sitting in a chair that's technically a throne, but only for consultation purposes. It's a little too short, a little too damp, and definitely smells like someone once ate a pear here and never apologized. Around me, the Royal Nap Council assembles, each shuffling in with the slow, ceremonial pace of people who believe time itself is watching. I've been invited only as an observer, which is a polite way of saying they expect me to stay quiet and maybe hold a candle if things get dramatic. The Grand Somnambulist, a man whose eyelids appear to be winning a slow, decades-long battle against his eyeballs, clears his throat. We convene today to discuss the matter of the royal pillows. He gestures to a pile of pillows on a velvet table. There's the pillow of indecision, stuffed with maybe fears, and the pillow of minor regrets, which apparently whispers things like, "You should have used a coaster." The discussion is intense. A duchess argues that the pillow of indecision is causing existential dread in the East Wing. A baron counters that it's actually promoting philosophical inquiry. Someone suggests filling a pillow with the hushed apologies of civil servants. The idea is met with murmurs of approval. I watch, utterly fascinated. This isn't just about comfort. It's about statecraft. Every sigh, every fluff, every nocturnal twitch is a political statement. The Grand Somnambulist turns his heavy gaze to me. Observer, he intones your thoughts on the optimal fluff-to-firmness ratio for promoting peaceful dreams of national prosperity. The room falls silent. All eyes are on me. The fate of the kingdoms, sleep, it seems, rests on my shoulders. I take a deep breath, thinking of the screaming man and the jam, the judgmental goose, and the mattress full of prayers. Well, I begin. Have you considered just a regular pillow? The collective gasp is so loud it nearly blows out the candles. It seems I've just committed an act of diplomatic treason. My nap evaluation is going to be brutal. Who knew sleep could be so stressful? I wonder if they have a pillow for that. Probably the pillow of impending doom. Sounds cozy. What a day. And it's not even lunchtime. The king needs a nap. A simple enough request, you might think. But in a royal court, nothing is ever simple. The first to be summoned is the physician, who enters robed in layers of gray linen and what looks like pure, unadulterated pessimism. He carries a small pouch of herbs and a massive leather-bound book that I can only assume is titled A Brief History of Mucus. He clears his throat, a sound like old parchment unfolding, and immediately launches into a long monologue about humors. And no, not the funny kind. He talks about yellow bile, black bile, and something to do with the optimal temperature of the spleen. After much deliberation, he concludes that the king's nap must occur precisely 1 hour after his second bowel movement of the day, or during what he calls the hour of intestinal grace, whichever comes first. The court nods sagely, as if this is the most sensible thing they've ever heard. Next up is the astrologer. He glides into the room, draped in a cloak covered in stars, or at least some very shiny, strategically placed buttons. He smells faintly of candle wax and poorly hidden anxiety. He dramatically unfurls a star chart the size of a ship's sail and begins explaining the cosmic implications of the king's slumber. Apparently, Mercury is currently in a rather heated argument with Saturn, which indicates a deeply troubling napping window. The moon, he adds with a sigh, is being particularly petty today. To make matters worse, Venus is also napping, and it would be incredibly rude to overlap. His recommendation, a brief 15-minute rest at the crack of dawn, with the king facing precisely northeast, surrounded by exactly 3 unripe apples and absolute, total silence. Again, everyone in the room nods, completely unfazed by the sheer absurdity of it all. This, they seem to think, is how naps are planned. The bishop is the last to arrive, fashionably late, as is his custom. He carries a scroll, a half-burned candle stub, and the weary expression of a man who has unhad a decent night's sleep since the last coronation. His voice is low and reverent, as if he's delivering a sermon. He insists that the king's nap is not merely about rest, it's a spiritual exercise. It must be preceded by a full confession, 5 distinct blessings, and a hymn sung backward by someone who has been recently widowed. It's not about sleep, he reminds the room, his eyes scanning the other advisors with a hint of disdain. It's about humility. The astrologer rolls his eyes so hard, you can practically hear the sound echo off the stone walls. The physician just strokes his beard, probably contemplating the humor balance of a backward singing widow. But there's a 4th advisor, one who has been in the room the entire time, unnoticed. He sits cross-legged on the floor, quietly feeding breadcrumbs to a small beetle. No one is quite sure of his official title, but he's known around the palace as the goose strategist. The story goes that years ago, during a tense diplomatic summit, he famously defeated a goose in a game of chess. It was a long, grueling match, and his victory demonstrated such profound patience and unorthodox thinking that he has been invited to all state matters ever since, especially those involving patience, poultry, or both. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, the entire court listens with a mixture of fear and fascination, the kind usually reserved for thunderstorms or very large wheels of cheese. The physician has just finished a rebuttal about the spiritual effects of phlegm, and the astrologer is preparing a counter chart about the moon's emotional state. The tension is thick enough to be measured in units of royal indecision. Just then, the goose strategist clears his throat. The sound is small, but it cuts through the room like a bell. Even the beetle on the floor pauses its meal and looks up. The other 3 advisors fall silent, turning to face him. The king, who has been trying very hard to stay awake through all of this, leans forward on his throne. The goose strategist looks calmly around the room, meeting each of their gazes. He then looks directly at the king. In a plain, simple voice, completely devoid of jargon or celestial nonsense, he says, "The king should nap when he is tired." A profound silence fills the hall. The physician's mouth hangs open. The astrologer slowly begins rolling up his massive star chart, a look of dawning realization on his face. The bishop simply blinks, as if the thought had never, ever occurred to him. The king stares at the goose strategist for a long moment. Then a slow smile spreads across his face. He lets out a huge yawn, stands up, and without another word, heads toward his bedchamber. The problem, it turned out, was never really a problem at all. There is silence. A deep, profound, spiritual kind of silence. The bishop makes a small, bewildered sound. The physician clutches his herb pouch like it might just get up and run away. The astrologer stares at the stars on his sleeve as if they've personally betrayed him. And then, the council immediately begins debating. The physician accuses the astrologer of promoting chaos. The astrologer, in turn, accuses the bishop of fear-mongering, and the bishop, he accuses the beetle of witchcraft. Yes, the beetle. Someone taps a spoon against a lute, a soft clinking sound trying to impose order. The air grows thick with incense and a heavy dose of passive aggression. Someone hands you a scroll and asks you to document this session. You look down at it. The scroll is already covered in someone else's scribbles, mostly detailed diagrams of different noses. You decide to begin writing anyway, though you have absolutely no idea what counts as important. The phrase ritual yawning comes up at least twice. So does blanket authority. No one laughs, not even a chuckle. An hour of this passes, and then the king arrives. He looks tired in that unique way only kings can. Weighed down by too many rings, too many layers of fabric, and far too many decisions about whether a dream can be considered a political statement. He listens to his counsel with a face like a slice of old bread, completely expressionless. When they finally finish their bickering, he nods, thanks them all solemnly, and then turns to you. He asks where the sun is. You just vaguely point toward a window. He lies down on a nearby bench, lets out one single, long sigh, and falls asleep instantly. The council is stunned. The bishop crosses himself. The astrologer furiously scribbles a note. The goose strategist, of all people, smiles faintly and offers the beetle a crumb. The meeting is adjourned. The royal nap, it seems, has begun without anyone's permission. As the sun sets, they begin to arrive, one by one, in pairs, sometimes in clusters, like pigeons trying to pretend they're not organized. They don't knock, they don't speak, they just enter the king's chamber as if they're walking onto a stage, and the performance is always the same. This is the sleepening, Act 15. You're seated on a low stool by the fire, supposedly as an observer, though no one seems to know who invited you or if you're even part of this ritual. You're holding a ceramic mug filled with something hot and questionably herbal. It smells like fennel and a hint of mild guilt. You watch as the silent crowd gathers around the sleeping king, their faces unreadable in the flickering firelight. What happens next is anyone's guess. But one thing is certain, you are a witness to something ancient, something strange, and something that no history book will ever quite manage to capture. And you just keep sipping your tea, documenting the diagrams of noses and the quiet absurdity of it all. The evening's performance begins. The first two, through the door, were identical expressions and very different shoes. One has sensible leather boots, scuffed at the toe. The other sports delicate silk slippers, embroidered with tiny, improbable fish. They approach the bed without a flicker of hesitation, lifting the sheets with the solemnity of men unveiling either a priceless relic or a catastrophic mistake. It's a fine line in this palace. One of them, the one in the sensible boots, pats the mattress gently. It's an oddly tender gesture, as though he's comforting it after a long, stressful day of being lain upon. He gives it another little pat, a silent there. The other, the man of the fish slippers, mutters, still damp. He says it with a weary sigh. The kind of sigh reserved for life's recurring disappointments. Without another word, he disappears back into the hallway, presumably on a quest for newer, less disappointing linen. No one acknowledges this minor domestic crisis. The room carries on. The king, reclining in a heavily cushioned chair nearby, lets out a long, slow sigh of his own, but he doesn't open his eyes. He is the still point in this turning world of bedtime bureaucracy. Then, a third person enters. She's strumming a lute that has seen better days. It only has 3 strings, and she plays with absolutely no sense of urgency. Her voice is breathy and thick, like someone singing directly into a bowl of warm porridge. The song she sings is, well, it's about something. It could be about sleep. It could be about birds. It could be a deeply profound metaphor about moral cleanliness and the stains upon one's soul. Honestly, it's hard to tell. The lyrics are a bit soupy. She sways gently as she plays, her eyes closed, lost in her own meandering melody. She's so lost, in fact, that she is completely unaware that the hem of her heavy cloak is slowly drifting toward the open hearth. You see it, you point. Before you can even form a word, a maid, materializing from the shadows, scurries over. With a swift, practiced motion, she doesn't bat at the fabric, but instead uses a nearby decorative pillow to gently tuck the stray cloak to safety. She does all this without once breaking eye contact with the king, her gaze locked on him with unwavering devotion. It's a masterclass in silent, efficient, fire prevention, loyalty. Next come the prayers. Of course, there are prayers. 3 members of the clergy file in, all dressed in muted tones of gray and beige, as if to not distract from the holiness of the moment. Each represents a slightly different angle on securing divine approval for the king's slumber. The first one whispers in what sounds like Latin, the words tumbling over each other in a soft, sibilant rush. The second, instead of speaking, simply hums a dissonant, vaguely unsettling chord that hangs in the air like a question mark. The third cleric doesn't make a sound at all. He just stands there, nodding slowly at the ceiling, as though he and God have a prior arrangement, and he's just reminding the Almighty that he owes him money. They kneel in a slightly mismatched line. They chant in their respective styles, one whispering, one humming, one nodding. They begin making strange, intricate shapes in the air with their fingers. It's either a form of sacred geometry, meant to align the room with celestial harmony, or it's an incredibly elaborate shadow puppet show about the tragic migration of geese. It could go either way. All the while, the bishop from earlier, the one with the important hat, stands in the doorway. He watches the proceedings with a detached air, but doesn't participate. He's still holding a single, gleaming silver spoon. No one asks why. It seems like the kind of question that would only lead to more questions, and frankly, everyone is already quite busy. And then, inevitably, the bell arrives. It's carried in by a boy no older than 9, who walks with a seriousness that doesn't quite fit his small frame. The bell is huge, made of bronze, and covered in dents that tell 1,000 silent stories. It smells faintly of ozone, that sharp, clean scent that follows a lightning strike. The boy begins his circuit. He walks to each corner of the room, and in each corner, he rings the massive bell 3 times. Dong, dong, dong. The sound isn't just loud, it's a physical presence that vibrates through the floor and up your spine. According to tradition, this ritual is meant to frighten away bad dreams, wandering spirits, and, most effectively, anyone in the room who still clings to the quaint notion of a rational bedtime. The king, remarkably, doesn't even flinch. He is a man accustomed to having his peace violently protected. After the final corner is cleared of spiritual loiterers, the king simply raises one hand, a quiet, almost imperceptible gesture. The boy, seeing the signal, vanishes as swiftly as he came, dragging the heavy bell behind him. It scrapes against the stone floor, sounding for all the world like an old, heavy grievance being reluctantly pulled away. Now, the room settles. The whirlwind of activity subsides into a quiet hum. The fire in the hearth has died down, leaving a sullen, orange glow that paints soft shadows on the walls. The bed, now freshly reassembled with a set of crisp, dry, and altogether more appropriate linens, stands ready. A cedar-scented bolster has been placed just so. It looks less like a place of rest and more like a very polite, very comfortable threat. Sleep is not a request, it is a command. 2 footmen approach the king's chair. One carries a small, ornate tray, holding a basin of steaming water, the steam carrying the scent of lavender and mint. This is for the royal feet. The other footman holds a small, dark glass vial, a simple paper label pasted on its side. The label reads, in a neat, cursive script, "Night thoughts, mild." The king declines the vial with a low grunt, a wave of his hand dismissing the bottled tranquility. But he accepts the footbath. He extends his feet with the tragic grace of someone who has been pampered his entire life, but has never once been surprised or genuinely delighted by it. The warm water swirls around his ankles, a final, gentle step in the long, elaborate march toward unconsciousness. The performance is almost over. The audience of servants begins to melt away, leaving the king to face the night, armed with clean feet and the heavy silence of his own thoughts. You stand at the edge of the royal bed, staring at it like it's just asked you a riddle and offered you a fish. It looms in the center of the chamber, plump and silent, a mountain of velvet feathers, and things that probably shouldn't be included in furniture. Someone has folded the sheets with military precision. There's a single sprig of rosemary on the pillow, as if the bed might get hungry mid-nap. The chambermaid beside you is small and wrapped in so many layers of wool, she could easily be mistaken for laundry. She leans in close, her breath smelling faintly of mint and ominous folklore. "Moan once for good," she whispers, "twice for less good. 3 times if you feel spiritually uneasy." You nod, and she steps back as though you've been marked for something solemn or flammable. "This is your job tonight. Official bed tester to His Majesty." It sounds noble until you realize it mostly involves lying down and reporting. You're not allowed to speak, not even a whisper. The king believes voices leave echoes in the linens. Echoes, he claims, steal his dreams. So, you're a silent bed warmer, a human comfort thermometer. Your task is simple. Lie in the king's bed for exactly 20 minutes. You are to assess its comfort, its warmth, and whether it feels haunted. After your shift, a scribe will debrief you using a series of interpretive hand gestures. A thumbs up means the mattress is fit for a king. A thumbs down means the royal carpenter is about to have a very bad day. Last week, your predecessor gave the thumb sideways gesture, and no one has seen him since. They just said he was reassigned to the moat. The whole process feels less like a job and more like a very elaborate, very quiet play, where you're the main prop. The door opens, and it's time for the pre-tuck-in ceremony. You watch as a woman you've never seen before approaches with a single feather and dabs it along the edge of the mattress. You assume it's ceremonial. She winks at you, then leaves. No one reacts. You don't ask. At last, the king rises. He is already in his sleep robe, which is lined with fox fur and embroidered with something that might be poetry or just a list of cheeses. He does not speak. He merely climbs into bed, the covers pulled back by 2 people wearing gloves and matching expressions of humble anticipation. Once in place, the blanket is drawn up to his chin with the kind of precision usually reserved for folding maps or concealing scandal. A scribe steps forward, records the exact moment of tucking, and retreats without a word. The final visitor is a woman who walks the perimeter of the room, dropping rose petals and muttering about destiny. She places 1 petal on the king's forehead, another on his foot, and a third on the windowsill. Then she blows out a single candle. Darkness seeps in, like an obedient dog. The door closes. You sit by the hearth, now barely warm, holding your mug of herbal uncertainty, and watch as the king's breathing evens out into the soft, rhythmic grumble of a man sleeping under the weight of history, responsibility, and at least 6 layers of aggressively monogrammed bedding. Somewhere in the hallway, a bell rings once more. Just in case, and you sit there, the silent guardian of the royal slumber, wondering if reassignment to the moat comes with a pension. You take a sip of your tea. It tastes a little like mint, and a lot like ominous folklore. They crunch faintly under your elbow. The mattress sighs. You lie down slowly, trying not to bounce, though it's difficult because the bed has layers. It's not just one surface. It's strata, a mattress sandwich with fillings that range from plush down to something that might be hay, or at least the idea of hay. Beneath you, something shifts. It could be a spring. It could be a mouse. You wriggle just a bit. Nothing aggressive. A mild exploratory wiggle. You shift to the left and land on something round and firm. You shift to the right and discover the whisper of a prayer stitched into the sheet with silver thread. The pillow cradles your head like it's unsure whether you deserve comfort or confrontation. The maid coughs gently. You realize you haven't moaned yet. This is part of the job, the assessment. You let out one sound, soft and low, trying to keep it neutral. The bed is fine. Possibly. Probably. You wait. She tilts her head. Was that one? Or two? She mouths. You moan again. Once, deliberately. She nods, pulls out a scroll, and scribbles something with a quill the size of your forearm. Then something beneath you shifts again. You freeze. It's subtle, like a breath or a threat. You roll slightly and feel it. A lump. Firm, oblong, and disturbingly warm. You press gently. It makes a noise. Not a human noise. Not quite, but not human either. A soft, purring noise. You glance at the maid. She raises an eyebrow. You moan twice, softly. She frowns. Lump, she mouths. You nod. She writes lump on the scroll, then underlines it twice. You shift again. The lump seems to settle, as if finding a more comfortable position. You moan a third time, slowly, with feeling. The chambermaid sighs. She sets down the quill. 3 moans. She walks from the room, not in a hurry, but with resignation. You are now alone in the royal bed, with the lump. It purrs again, a low rumble that vibrates through the strange layers of the mattress. Tentatively, you reach down, your fingers brushing against something that feels like fur. No, more like warm velvet. The lump shifts, pressing back against your hand. You lie perfectly still, listening to the sound of your own heart, and the steady, rhythmic purr from the mysterious creature sharing the royal bed with you. You wonder what a 4-moan rating would even mean. You consider it, but decide against it. For now, 3 moans and a warm, purring lump is more than enough adventure for one day. You close your eyes, surprisingly comfortable, and decide to just go with it. What's the worst that could happen? The king's first sleep begins with a sigh, a slow exhale of velvet and ceremony. He's tucked beneath layers of ritual and goose-feathered certainty, and the room dims around him. It's not magic, but sheer deference. As if even the torches know better than to burn too brightly in the presence of a man about to nap under divine sanction. I'm sitting by the brazier, watching the flame roll its eyes. It's a strange vigil, this duty of watching a monarch rest. 15 minutes in, he wakes up, just like that. The silence is absolute, then broken by the swift, coordinated rush of attendants. They move like a stage crew during a frantic mid-show change. A towel is brought, slightly damp, but warm. A basin appears, the water inside infused with rosemary and what smells suspiciously like crushed anxieties. The king washes his hands, scrubbing as if he's trying to remove a stubborn memory. Then he washes his face like it owes him something, drying it with a cloth embroidered with an image of himself sleeping. I'm not sure if that's meant to be ambition or prophecy. It's a little on the nose, if you ask me. Next, a servant approaches, walking with the quiet reverence usually reserved for holy relics. He carries a small silver tray. In the very center, one perfect radish sits, glistening with dew, or perhaps anticipation. The king picks it up and eats it whole, chewing slowly, deliberately. The crunch echoes through the chamber with the solemnity of thunder in a cathedral. It's the most important radish in the entire kingdom, and it knows it. After the radish comes the prayer. The chaplain arrives, half asleep himself, his robes on backward. He starts muttering a blessing that sounds suspiciously like it's meant for chickens. Realizing his mistake mid-sentence, He fumbles to turn his stole around and begins again, this time with the correct incantation for royal slumber. The king bows his head. The entire room holds its breath. I stare up at the ceiling, which is painted with stars arranged in blessed constellations that somehow look oddly judgmental. They seem to be asking what I'm doing with my life. With the reddish consumed and the heavens placated, it's time for second sleep. The king lies down again, this time with much less ceremony. Just a nod, a brief grunt, and a rearrangement of limbs that suggests he's negotiating terms with the bed. An attendant hands me a small, ornate bell. Ring this if he starts levitating, he whispers, then walks away. No one explains why levitation is even on the table. Is it a common side effect of royal napping? A known issue with this particular mattress. I'm left holding the bell, feeling woefully unprepared for supernatural events. The king dozes off. This sleep seems deeper. His breathing changes, slows to a steady, rhythmic cadence. A small wrinkle in his brow, etched there by the day's worries, finally smooths out. I think he might actually be dreaming. Whether it's of peace, or ducks, or a tactical error he made in the Battle of Slightly Moist Hill, I cannot say. His fingers twitch. His foot jerks once, a sudden, sharp movement. A single whisper escapes his lips, "Bertram," before he falls silent again. I glance around. No one in the room is named Bertram. A collective, unspoken question hangs in the air. I shift in my chair, trying not to make a sound. My foot bumps the leg of a nearby table. A silver spoon, perched precariously on the edge, slides off. It lands on the stone floor, not with a clatter, but with a dull, final-sounding click, like a lock closing. Every head in the room turns toward me. I freeze, my heart pounding in my throat. The king stirs. He frowns in his sleep, then mutters something about bread. A steward, ever vigilant, quickly makes a note on a small wax tablet. Crisis averted. The kingdom is safe. For now. 23 minutes pass in thick, anxious silence. Then, he wakes again, this time with purpose. He sits bolt upright, his eyes wide but unfocused, like someone searching for meaning in a dream they're still partly inside. He points a regal finger toward the window. "Too much blue," he says, his voice raspy with sleep. It's the middle of the night. The sky is entirely, completely black. A servant bows deeply, draws the heavy curtain closed, and says without a hint of irony, "Of course, Your Majesty." And we all wait, ready for the next phase of this bizarre, nocturnal ritual. Have you ever wondered what it's like to sleep like a king? I'm not talking about a luxurious mattress or a silk pillowcase. I mean the real, historical, sometimes bizarre, rituals that royalty went through just to get some tie. It wasn't as simple as turning off the lights and closing your eyes. It was a public spectacle, a ceremony, and sometimes a bit of a circus. Let's travel back to the court of Louis XIV, the Sun King. His bedtime routine, known as the kucha, was a major event. Imagine this. You've had a long day of being incredibly important, and now you just want to sleep. But first, you have to parade through a room packed with dozens, sometimes hundreds, of courtiers, all watching your every move. The highest-ranking nobles had the honor of helping you undress. One hand you your nightshirt, another hold your candlestick. It was less about comfort and more about reinforcing the social hierarchy, even in pajamas. Privacy was a luxury not even a king could afford. This wasn't just a French thing, either. Across Europe, the royal bedchamber was a center of power. It was a place where secret conversations happened, where petitions were heard, and where political maneuvering took place, right up until the moment the royal head hit the pillow. The bedroom wasn't a private sanctuary. It was a public stage. Think of it as the ultimate open-plan office, but with more four-poster beds and a lot less personal space. But what about the sleep itself? Before the Industrial Revolution and electric lighting, most people didn't sleep in one long, 8-tower block like we do today. They practiced what historians call segmented sleep, or first sleep and second sleep. People would go to bed shortly after dusk, sleep for about 4 hours, and then wake up for an hour or two in the middle of the night. This wasn't a sign of insomnia. It was completely normal. This quiet, wakeful period was a treasured time. People would use it to pray, to read by candlelight, to have a quiet chat with their spouse, or even to visit neighbors. It was a time for reflection and intimacy, a peaceful island in the middle of the night's darkness. Then, they would go back to bed for their second sleep, waking up with the dawn. There are countless references to this in literature, from Chaucer to Dickens. It was just the way the world worked. So, when we imagine a king in his grand bedchamber, he likely wasn't just sleeping through the night. He might wake up, surrounded by the faint glow of embers in the fireplace, and use that time for quiet contemplation or to attend to matters of state. Perhaps a trusted advisor would be summoned for a clandestine meeting in the dead of night. The entire rhythm of life, work, and rest was fundamentally different from our modern, non-stop world. Now, let's talk about the royal bed itself. These weren't just pieces of furniture. They were statements. The Great Bed of Ware, for example, is a gigantic oak bed built in the late 16th century. It's over 10 feet wide and could supposedly sleep for couples at once. It became so famous that it was mentioned in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Beds were often the most expensive item in a household, and for a king, they were symbols of wealth, power, and dynastic continuity. They were lavishly decorated with intricate carvings, heavy velvet curtains, and layers upon layers of fine linens and furs. These curtains, by the way, weren't just for show. They provided privacy in a room that might be full of attendants and bodyguards. They also kept out drafts and kept in warmth, creating a cozy little micro-environment. It was like having your own personal tent right in the middle of your bedroom, an essential feature in a drafty, unheated stone castle. And what did they wear to bed? Forget comfy cotton pajamas. Night clothes for the nobility were often made of fine linen or silk. A nightcap was essential for both men and women to keep their heads warm, but it could get much more elaborate. Imagine a king so concerned with his image and security that he's still partially armored. While sleeping in a full suit of armor is mostly a myth, the lines between daytime and nighttime attire were often blurred. The king's bedchamber was a semi-public space, so he had to be presentable at all times. Consider the odd rituals that might have surrounded the royal sleep. Food and drink were common. A goblet of spiced wine or warm milk might be brought to the king's bedside to help him drift off. And what about the guards? Royal security didn't clock off at bedtime. Guards would be posted inside and outside the bedchamber, their presence a constant reminder of the king's importance and the potential dangers he faced. The groom of the stool, one of the most intimate and trusted positions, would also be nearby. His job, while sounding unpleasant to us, gave him unparalleled access to the monarch and made him a very powerful figure at court. Now, let's imagine a scene. The king has finished his first sleep. The court has long since departed. It's just him, a few trusted servants, and the quiet of the night. He signals, and a book is brought to him. He reads a few pages by candlelight, his mind turning over the day's events. He's not just a king. He's a man in the middle of the night, with the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders. This quiet, wakeful hour might be the only time he truly has to himself, away from the prying eyes and endless demands of his court. After a while, he grows tired again. A servant silently steps forward with a fresh blanket. The king wraps it around himself and lies back down, sinking into the mountain of pillows. His second sleep begins. This is the period where the strangest royal dreams might have taken place. Dreams of state, of battles, of ancestors. What must it be like to dream when your waking life is already so far removed from the ordinary? It's a fascinating glimpse into a world so different from our own. The concept of sleep, which we see as such a private and personal act, was, for royalty, deeply public and ritualized. It was woven into the fabric of power, politics, and society. The next time you crawl into your simple, comfortable bed and turn off the light, spare a thought for the kings of old. Your quiet, uninterrupted 8 hours of sleep is a modern luxury that even they, with all their wealth and power, could never have imagined. So, what do you think? Would you trade your comfortable, private bedroom for a night in a grand, drafty, and very crowded royal bedchamber? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about these historical sleep habits. The Queen, reclining on a fainting couch shaped like a lion that has clearly given up, rolls her eyes and fans herself with a slipper. He just doesn't like feeling vulnerable, she says, her voice dripping with the kind of exasperation only years of marriage can produce. Says if he dies in a dream, he wants to die standing. It's an interesting philosophy, I'll give him that. Just then, the royal cook appears, breathless, holding 2 thick wooden planks under his arm. Reinforcements, he mutters, not to me, not to anyone really, just to the air itself. He immediately crawls beneath the enormous royal bed. I hear him grunting down there. The last time he wore the greaves, the cook's voice echoes from under the mattress. The whole frame gave up, and the floorboards asked for mercy. I guess it's my turn now. I try slipping into the royal sleepwear designated for guests of minimal importance, but significant curiosity. That's me. The sleeves itched immediately. The wool is so coarse, it feels like it actively resents being touched. I'm almost certain the seams are whispering insults at me. A row of pearl buttons runs from neck to navel, all impossibly close together. Each one seems to need a specific angle and probably a quiet prayer to fasten. I managed to get 3 of them done before giving up entirely. This is more work than my actual job. And the pants, oh. The pants are somehow worse. They're tight in all the wrong places and loose in a way that feels accusatory, like they know my secrets. The chambermaid comes to my rescue, her fingers deft and utterly indifferent to my personal dignity as she tugs and pulls. This pair belonged to the last taster, she says, her voice flat. She pauses, then clarifies, of dreams, not food. Though honestly, same difference. I thank her. She does not respond, just turns and walks away, leaving me in my woolen prison. Meanwhile, the main event is starting. The king adjusts his gorget, the steel plate protecting his neck, and asks loudly, have the pillows been blessed yet? The bishop hurries forward, muttering something in Latin while sprinkling water from a small flask. I catch a glimpse of the label. It says, mostly holy. That's reassuring. A monk wearing a nightcap follows him, ringing a small bell and scattering dried rose hips across the bed. He declares them emotionally fortifying, whatever that means. The Queen pretends to sleep through all of it, but I see her peeking through one eye. She's seen this show before. Finally, the king climbs into bed, clanking like a knight who's lost his horse and his entire sense of proportion. The sheets groan under the weight. The mattress lets out a deep sigh, a sound of pure duty and compressed steel. He lies down perfectly flat, arms crossed over his chest, like he's expecting judgment at any moment. Sleep is a battlefield, he says softly, to the ceiling. I, still itchy and mildly panicked in my borrowed pajamas, lie down on a much smaller cot nearby. It feels like it's filled with straw, or possibly shredded tax records. The wool of my pajamas begins to bunch in strange places, forming small, uncomfortable mountains against my skin. I shift, and a single pearl button presses directly into my sternum, like it says trying to ask me a very important, very pointy question. As the candle dims, the bishop withdraws, his work of mostly blessing done. The Queen lets out a final, long-suffering sigh and removes her tiara. She places it in a bowl of what looks like salt, to keep the dreams light, she'd told me earlier, as the room falls into a clanking, itching, whispering silence. I close my eyes and wonder what on earth I'm going to dream about. You blink, and the room shifts, or maybe it doesn't. It's hard to tell in the flickering candlelight. The king, your father, is asleep in his massive oak bed, his breath a gentle, rhythmic wheeze. But the air around him is anything but still. It's thick with unspoken words and the rustle of servants' clothing. A young woman you've never seen before kneels beside the bed. She carefully rebuttons a button on the king's velvet robe, a button that wasn't even undone a moment ago. Her movements are precise, almost reverent, as if this single button holds the fate of the kingdom. You hear a soft clink to your right. On a small table that definitely wasn't there 5 minutes ago sits a porcelain bowl. A silver spoon rests against its rim, gleaming. Steam rises from the bowl, carrying a faint, savory scent you can't quite place. No one is eating. No one even looks at it. It's just there, an actor on a stage waiting for a cue that will never come. Then, the humming starts. It's quiet, almost lost beneath the crackle of the fireplace. The tune is simple, without any real melody, yet it feels deeply, unsettlingly familiar. You rack your brain, and then it clicks. It's the same little tune the Queen was whistling earlier today. She was in her dressing room, surrounded by dozens of mannequin heads, arranging her collection of wigs by mood. There was the disappointed but hopeful wig, the vaguely annoyed by the court jester wig, and her personal favorite, the contemplating a minor edict wig. She was whistling this exact tune as she placed a tiara on the quietly smug one. The humming seems to weave its way through the very fabric of the room, and for a strange, fleeting moment, everything falls into a perfect, bizarre synchrony. The fire in the hearth crackles in perfect rhythm with the tune. The king lets out a long, slow exhale, perfectly on beat. It's like the entire room is a single, breathing organism. A moth, drawn by the candlelight, flutters past your face in time with the quiet harmony. Its wings beat a silent percussion against the air, and then, just as you notice it, it veers away and vanishes into the shadows, as if embarrassed to have been caught performing. From just outside the heavy oak door, you hear the bishop's voice. It's a low, resonant rumble, a chant that's not quite Latin, but not quite any language you know. It has the cadence of a prayer, but the substance of a grocery list. The words are meaningless, but they carry an immense weight. Inside the room, the servants all bow their heads for exactly 3 seconds, a practiced, unified motion. Then, just as quickly, they straighten up and resume their whispering. Their whispers are the room's true soundtrack, a constant, sibilant murmur that you can never quite make out. It's like listening to the sea from a great distance. You can hear the sound, but you can't discern the individual waves. One servant is now dusting the corner of a massive tapestry on the wall. You've looked at that tapestry 1,000 times. It's supposed to depict the great battle of whoever, but you're pretty sure it's just a chaotic scene of a war nobody actually won. Everyone just sort of got tired and went home. But the servant dusts it with the focus of a scholar studying a sacred text. Another is over by the fruit bowl. He's rearranging the arrangement. A minute ago, the pears were clearly the dominant fruit, piled high in the center. Now, he's meticulously repositioning them, giving the apples and plums more prominence. He cocks his head, studies his work, and moves a single grape 1/4 of an inch to the left. It's a matter of the utmost importance. Apparently, the politics of fruit. You try to sit up, a groan catching in your throat. Your muscles feel stiff, as if you've been lying here for days. Instantly, a servant is at your side. Without even looking at you, she places a cup of water near your hand. Her movements are fluid, economical, perfected through endless repetition. You pick up the cup. It's strangely warm, and when you take a tentative sip, it's slightly salty, like tears. You don't ask why. You've learned that some questions in this palace are better left unasked. The answers are usually more confusing than the mystery. The king mumbles something in his sleep. This time it's louder, more distinct than his usual wheezing. It sounds like, "Beware the hound." He says it with a strange urgency. Or, wait, was it? Where's the ham? It's hard to be sure. His royal diction isn't what it used to be. The servants standing nearby hear it, and they both nod with the utmost solemnity. One of them immediately turns and leaves the room, walking with a purpose that suggests a ham-related emergency or a looming canine threat. The other servant moves to the king's bed and carefully, tenderly, tucks the heavy blanket tighter around his knees, as if those knees hold all the secrets of the universe. The candle on your bedside table flickers, casting long, dancing shadows that make the room seem to warp and twist. For a split second, you see your own reflection in a polished silver tray. The face that looks back is gaunter, more tired than you feel. It's a stranger wearing your features. You lie back down, your head sinking into the plush pillow. You keep your eyes open, watching the shadows play. The room breathes around you. The servants whisper their endless secrets. The night goes on, as it always does, too quiet to trust, and far too loud to sleep. You find yourself staring at the candle stub. It's melting slowly, wax dripping onto a small plate shaped like a miniature knight's shield. The flame wavers, a tiny, defiant speck of light against the oppressive darkness of the chamber. You follow a single drop of wax as it rolls down the side and solidifies. It's hypnotic, mesmerizing. And then, a bell chimes. It's not the grand, booming bell from the clock tower that announces the hour. This is a small, hesitant sound, a bell that seems unsure of its own authority, as if it's ringing itself apologetically. But it rings all the same, and the effect is instantaneous. Everyone in the room pauses. It's not a freeze, not a sudden stop. It's a deliberate, collective halt, the kind of pause people make when they've just been caught in the middle of a poorly thought-out plan. The whispering stops, the dusting stops, the fruit arranging stops. The air becomes heavy with anticipation. The king, who you thought was deep in his possibly ham-related dreams, opens one eye. It's a slow, deliberate, almost theatrical movement. The kind of eye-opening that has been practiced for hours in front of a mirror to achieve the maximum dramatic effect. He doesn't blink. He just stares at the canopy of his bed. His fingers, which had been resting peacefully on the blanket, give a slight twitch. Then they fall still. The bishop, who had been sitting quietly on a stool near the foot of the bed, rises. He stands tall, his dark robes making him look like a pillar of shadow. He clears his throat with a ceremonial severity, a sound that says, "Listen closely, for I am about to say something both completely nonsensical and legally binding." He lets the silence hang in the air for a moment longer, savoring the tension. "It is now 3 minutes to curfew," he announces, his voice filling the suddenly silent room. "Position yourselves." The servants move with a new, quiet urgency. The one who had been dusting the tapestry now stands at attention beside it. The fruit arranger straightens his back and clasps his hands behind him. The woman who rebuttoned the king's robe now stands near the headboard, her gaze fixed on the wall. They each take up a specific, seemingly random spot in the room, like chess pieces being set for a game you don't understand. A sense of ritual descends, a strange, nightly ceremony commencing. You, lying in your bed, are just a spectator to this silent, baffling play. The king's one open eye swivels, ever so slowly, and seems to land on you. A silent question hangs in the air, but you have no answers. The curfew is approaching, and you have no idea what that even means. Thanks for watching.